Saturday morning, I wake up craving pancakes, but soon realize I'm going to have to make a quick run to the store. On my way there, I get stuck behind a Honda Civic, who, judging by its blinker, is trying to drive around the world to the left at a whopping 24 miles an hour. I resist the urge to unleash some wicked road rage. I keep my cool. When I get to the store, I nearly buy an entire pyramid of Jolly Green Giants and a shelf of Aunt Jemima's because a woman stops her cart abruptly in front of me. I resist the urge to ram my cart into the back of her ankles. I keep my cool. As I get my pancake supplies, Bisquick and chocolate chips for the smiley face, I see an opening in the express lane. As I'm about to snag my spot in line, a man yakking on his Bluetooth with a full cart steps right in front of me. He has way more than 15 items in there. I'm about to lose my cool. What do I want? Revenge. When do I want it? Right now. Revenge is sweet. Or is it? Revenge wasn't so sweet for 17-year-old Clarence Johnson, who just last month was involved in a fistfight with another teenager, Robert Dawson. After leaving the scene and returning home, the Associated Press reports that Johnson's mother handed him a gun with instructions to get revenge. What should have been an everyday adolescent dispute actually ended up costing one young man his life and ruining another. Revenge is a plague in our culture. It's becoming more and more common in politics, business, and even in our relationships. There has to be an alternative. But how do we get there? First, we need to understand what revenge is and where it comes from. Then consider how it harms us. And finally, how we can overcome this personal and cultural instinct. Oh my God, are you serious? What is revenge? It's retaliation or vengeance for some wrongdoing, where justice seeks to balance the scales, when revenge is more about getting a pound of flesh. In a study conducted by the University of London, 2 volunteers were hooked up to a device that allowed them to apply pressure to the other volunteer's hand. They were asked to continually apply an equal amount of force back and forth. Researchers found that although volunteers were sincerely trying to do this, they actually applied 40% more force than they had just received, thus increasing the pain. This urge to return tit with a much bigger tat is natural. We are wired to seek revenge. National Geographic reports in 2004 that the part of our brain, the dorsal striatum, that receives rewards for feelings like love, is also stimulated when getting revenge. No wonder we no longer fight our natural instinct to harm. We embrace it. This is simple for us, because we live in a world in which it's perfectly normal to return wrong for wrong. We find it easier to harm someone than to work out situations. We learn from our relatives that revenge is okay. Politicians work to damage other politicians because they did the same to them, and celebrities duke it out in the tabloids. Rosie O'Donnell calls Donald Trump a blowhard with no morals, and Trump calls O'Donnell a fat slob. K-Fed and Britney Spears, Nicole Richie and Paris Hilton. They, or perhaps the Wizards at Us magazine, make revenge seem like an acceptable part of our lives, when revenge is the basis of most human conflict. Psychiatrist Dr. Edward Hallowell says that the history of the world is actually the history of revenge. The cycle of revenge began with Cain and Abel, burrowed into ancient Rome, and spread to early Japan, and is clearly still a part of our lives today. Revenge even entertains us. In classic literature, Hamlet avenges his father by killing his uncle. And ancient mythology is riddled with revenge. Children's cartoons clearly demonstrate our need for revenge as well. Tom and Jerry are always trying to inflict as much pain on each other as possible. And our favorite Looney Tunes antics are full of guns, dynamite, and lethal 2x4s. In the animated world, Wile E. Coyote always survives the falling anvil, and Sylvester grows his hair back in the blink of an eye. In the 3-dimensional world, however, revenge is real, and it's not so funny. Like when we let revenge compromise our relationships. Sometimes we actually value acts of vengeance over relationships with friends and family, the people we're supposed to care about. In December, the student editor of our school newspaper wrote a critical article about a particular practice in one of our school programs. Controversy ensued. Instead of using this as opportunity for dialogue or change, the sponsor wrote an angry email in retaliation to the student editor. These personal attacks caused pain that is yet to be resolved. This kind of vengeance isn't just between individuals. In Iraq, the Shiites want revenge on the Sunnis for religious disputes. The Irish Catholics want revenge on the Protestants for religious disputes. And Israel bombed Lebanon for land and religious disputes. In each of these examples, each side would have claimed that they were justified in their actions because they were just responding to the other's wrongdoing. But will the retaliation ever end? The saying goes, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The result is a blind and toothless society. But the world tells us we're weak if we don't respond with vengeance. How much more strength, though, is required to understand and forgive, rather than shun and harm? A lot. On October 3rd, in a one-room Amish schoolhouse, 20 school children and their teachers were learning and working just like any other day. Then 32-year-old Charles Carl Roberts busted in, ordered the boys and teachers to evacuate, while he barricaded himself and the remaining girls inside. He bound them and lined them up against the chalkboard, where he eventually killed them and himself. 5 innocent, unsuspecting little girls died because of one man's need for vengeance for something that had happened 20 years earlier. This was an incredible loss for the small Lancaster County Amish community. Anthropologist Gertrude Huntington wrote, "Their hurt is enormous, but they don't balance hurt with hate." By society's standards, the Amish had every right to curse Robert's name, never forget what happened, and blame his family. But instead, they chose to show an immense act of grace by understanding what happened, asking for forgiveness for Roberts, and offering their support to his family. We need to change our vengeful society, and we can do this by following the Amish example of turning the other cheek, and not returning evil with evil. In fact, we could start a revolution and return evil with good. When someone does something wrong to you, instead of returning their favor, try embracing them. Not physically, or else they might file for assault. But understand that they've been taught their entire lives that what they just did was perfectly acceptable. When someone parks in your parking spot at work, instead of letting them know in front of all of your coworkers in the break room, or instead of keying their car, park somewhere else. Goodness knows we all need the extra walk. Or when your mother-in-law tells you how she really feels about you over dinner, take out a noose and hang her from the rafters. Just kidding. Help clear the table and wash the dishes, because we don't always see the other side of the story and why these people are acting the way that they are. Dr. Stephen Covey tells a story of being on a train with a man whose children were out of control, and he was doing nothing about it. When the delinquent children had finally annoyed everyone on the train, Covey finally asked the man to please take control of his children. The man came out of what seemed to be a deep trance and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. We're on our way back from burying their mother." Things aren't always the way our vengeful instincts think they are. We need to learn to understand and offer alternatives rather than jump to vengeful conclusions. Author John Renish writes, "Revenge locks us in our box of limitations and dooms us to endless cycles of vengeance and violence. Reparation, reconciliation, and forgiveness allows us to expand our horizons and grow." And it's hard to grow if on a simple trip to the grocery store you're distracted with popping a cap at a motorist, snapping an Achilles tendon, or committing various other felonies against fellow shoppers. I'm not saying in every instance of wrongdoing roll over and be a victim, but let's think justice, not violence. Forgiveness, not revenge. Love, not hate. Because maybe revenge isn't so sweet.